So right triangles come up in the real world all the time. So there are word problems where you're going to use the Pythagorean theorem to solve for missing elements. So our first example, a ramp is elevated to a height of 2 feet. So a ramp is slanted, and here's the ground. So the ramp starts at the ground and goes up. So it's elevated, that's a key word, elevated to a height of 2 feet. Really, height is the key word. So it goes up 2 feet. The length of the ramp, so this is like the actual ramp itself. So here's our actual ramp. The length of the ramp is 8 feet. What is the horizontal distance? Horizontal distance. Horizontal distance means side to side. So we are trying to figure out the horizontal distance between the lower end of the ramp and the base. So this is what we're looking for, that horizontal distance. So this is a right triangle, and we can use Pythagorean theorem to find this horizontal distance. So x squared plus 2 squared should be equal to 8 squared. X squared plus 4 is equal to 8 times 8 is 64. So I subtract 4, x squared is 60. So x, that horizontal distance, is going to be the square root of 60. Well, if you think about, I'll do it kind of off to the side. If you think about the square root of 60, 60 is 4 times 15. So the square root of 4 is 2. So 2 root 15, that's the answer in simplest radical form. But maybe the directions would tell us to round to the nearest tenth. If we're going to round to the nearest tenth, that means that we are going to type this into our calculator and get a decimal, which is 7.745. So rounded to the nearest tenth would be 7.7. And this is a word problem, so we need to include units. So this is in feet. 7.7 feet. So the horizontal distance is 7.7 feet. Okay, in our second example, Paul propped a ladder against a wall. So here's the ground, here's our wall, and here's our ladder that gets propped up against the wall. So here's the ladder. And the ladder's 10 feet long, and it asks us how high up on the wall will the ladder reach. So we're looking for this distance, like how high up on the wall will the ladder reach if the foot of the ladder is 5 feet away from the wall. So the foot of the ladder is the bottom of the ladder, and it's 5 feet away from the wall. So we're looking for this vertical distance right here. So 5 squared plus x squared should be equal to 10 squared. 5 squared is 25. Equals 100. I subtract 25 from both sides. X squared is 75. And so then x is the square root of 75. Well, 75 is 3 times 25. So that would be 5 root 3. If I had asked you to keep the answer in simplest radical form, that is your answer, 5 root 3, simplest radical form. If I had asked you to round to the nearest tenth, that means you're going to type it into your calculator and get a decimal, which I'm not done yet. 5 root 3 is 8.66, so round to the nearest tenth would be 8.7. And then this is like, that's a 7. 8.7. And then in units, that's feet, 8.7 feet, because it's an actual length. So 8.7 feet. So make sure you're reading the directions. Sometimes they'll ask you to keep your answer in simplest radical form, which just wants a simplified radical. Other times it'll say round to the nearest tenth, round to the nearest hundredth, something like that. That means it wants a decimal and for you to round. If it does not tell you to round, you can't just make up your own rounding rules. So if the problem doesn't specify what it wants to round to, go ahead and keep it in simplest radical form.